Hi, welcome to this podcast, this episode of Next Level Contractor. I'm Michael Bourgeois, and at Next Level Contractor, our goal is to help new aspiring contractors get to the next level. Or maybe you've had a contracting business for a while and you're struggling to get into the $1 million range, right? You've got 100,000, no problem, but you're trying to get from 100 to a million, or you're trying to get from 0 to a million. You're trying to hit that first benchmark where you don't become a statistic with your business. That is our mission here at Next Level Contractor. Today we have an excellent guest. His name is Tom Hicken. He is a very accomplished guy. He is an author of a couple of books on how to become a journeyman plumber. He is an instructor for the Utah State University. And he has been in the plumbing trade, and he is a licensed plumbing contractor himself. For many years. So we're extremely fortunate to have him as a guest. Thanks for agreeing to do this, Tom. How are you this morning?
Great. Yeah. I'm glad to help. I know what it's like to start a business, to try and figure out how to make it work, and to ride all the ups and downs. So I'm excited to be able to maybe share a few things, and I'm excited for anyone out there who is in that situation. It's a great opportunity to be able to start your own thing and to create your own world.
So again, sincerely appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy, and time is money. So I'll get right to it. I won't waste your time. You are you're a teacher, right? You're a college professor
I am. Yeah,
um, at Utah State University. And I think you mentioned it is you're working in the southeastern part of the state of Utah.
correct.
Okay, and they're and what so what's going on there? What is it that they have you doing out there? What are you teaching? You just teaching plumbing? Because that's a interesting thing that to have a trade like that in a college.
Yeah. Most of the time, plumbing is taught in like a tech school or a tech college.
Right, like a vocational trade
Yeah,
school.
this is a unique situation where the university has absorbed a tech college in that area. So yeah, it's a part of the university, but
Well,
it
that's
is
pretty
very
forward
much
thinking.
yeah, and what it is because I think universities across the country are under a lot of scrutiny, and I hear it about
Do
like,
you
are
think these
they
things are
worth
gonna
it?
trend that way with universities?
I don't think so. I don't think they're gonna be merging with tech schools, but, this brings to the table to this university something that's, the hands-on, something that's very, like, viable. Because again, there's a lot
Yeah.
of degrees out there that may or may not lead to a successful career, but, they've absorbed this, and so, yeah, what I do is I teach plumbing apprenticeship, just like most states, I imagine, have a formal apprenticeship. It's a 4-year program. We take, apprentices. They have to be working full time as a plumber in order to enroll, and then they come for evening classes. We teach them code, we teach math, we help them in every way over those 4 years to prepare for their journeyman test, and then they can go and take that test, get their license, and move forward with their career.
That's awesome. What prompted Utah State University to absorb a trade school?
It's actually, from my understanding, it was the state legislature required them to do that in that area. They had a tech school and they had a university, and then this Utah State was the land grant university, so they kind of have a reach throughout the state. And the legislatures were like, let's just put this all together, and the university can oversee what's happening in this area. So it's an interesting mix, but it's really great.
Sounds pretty cool. Yeah, I mean that's I'm sure that's a fascinating story in itself to see how that unfolded.
It
Because I
is,
mean, you just
yeah.
think what would possess a even legislation to get involved, right, in something like that? Why would legislation make a state university absorb a vocational trade school
Right, yeah.
or acquire it? I don't know how it all happened, merge together with it, whatever. That's pretty interesting. I think you mentioned there was a need for it in that area, so I guess that had something to do with it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um, so was there just a lack of tradespeople out there?
That's really, yeah, throughout that whole area. And I mean, if you look even throughout our state or throughout our country, plumbing in general, there's a lot of people leaving the trade, they're retiring, and not as many coming in. And there's a labor shortage everywhere, but it's a real issue. And especially in that area, I know of a lot of plumbing companies there with people who are either about to retire, or yeah, they have no intention of keeping their business going a decade from now. And so there's a lot of room and there's a lot of need. They're desperate for plumbers, and it's hard to find people. So it's been exciting to be able to engage. Part of my history, I've been a plumber since I started 2001.
I was just
Went
about to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I went through my apprenticeship, and I mean my 4 years I was done. It was about the end of 2006 when I finished my apprenticeship for myself, and so I've been in plumbing since then. It was in 2010 I started my own business, but prior to that, I was working alongside. I already had my journeyman license. I was working alongside some of my apprentices, and they were complaining about how bad school was because plumbing schools. I mean, some are good, but some are more like plumbing study hall, where it's like they got a plumber who's a teacher, but he's not a great teacher, and he just says, "Well, here, go look at this in the book. Hey, let's talk about hunting." That's how it really was
Oh,
for me. And
gotcha.
they were complaining about how poor the education was, and this was in 2008. I decided I'm gonna go see if I can make a difference. Go get hired in. I got hired part time as a apprentice teacher, and really I've been involved with apprentice and plumbing education ever since. Most of that time was part time as just an evening instructor, but over that time I was able to refine my resources, my ability to teach and to help plumbers to understand code, to understand math, and to really prepare. So I worked for quite a while at another college, and then it was hired full time in 2020. It was like right as we were going through COVID. I got hired in as the department head, so I was overseeing plumbing and electrical. And then it was just about 2 years ago that I started just talking with Utah State University, where they had this unique need. Like there was no plumbing education in that whole area.
Oh,
Students would
wow.
have to enroll in Salt Lakes Community College, and they'd be 5 hours away, and they'd have to like participate remotely and drive to Salt Lake for certain lab activities, and it was just
Goodness.
really difficult. So it was an exciting opportunity. The university offered me to come build a new program from scratch and involve the plumbing community, reach out, and that's been really exciting. I
Wow.
started full time and I started teaching just last fall down there. It's based in Price, Utah, but it's been really fun to engage with the plumbers there. They're excited and enthusiastic about the new help that they're receiving to help advance their apprentices and therefore their companies. So that's kind of where I'm
Good.
at with my career. In the meantime, I have continued my own plumbing contracting business. I started that in 2010, and for about 10 years, I did just. I mean, that was my main thing was service and repair. Been through all kinds of crazy experiences that way. I grew my business, so that's where I like is we're talking with people who are starting businesses or growing businesses. I've been through all those bumps, the ups and downs. I grew it. I ran into big problems. I grew it again. Eventually, as I found opportunity in education, I sold a major portion of the business. But I still run my business. I still go out every week, and most of what I do now is new construction, custom homes. It's enough work that I can handle it. I don't need employees, but at the same time, um, I love being involved with the trade, keeping my hands in it, and so it's a good mix. Most of what I do is education, but every week I'm out just doing some plumbing and
Just doing some service calls.
yeah,
That's
I'll
cool,
take on
man.
some of those too.
Yeah, that is very cool. So there were no plumbers, so people were just going in outhouses until you showed up on the scene.
Well, it's more
Finally,
like
there's indoor plumbing. in
Yeah,
Price, Utah.
plumbing exists, the problem is just, who's there to help fix it, and here's what I think we're dealing with throughout the country, where anywhere there's a shortage of help for service, especially for plumbing, is people just are gonna have to figure out and do it themselves. If you need something fixed and you call and cannot get a plumber, you just cannot, what do you do?
What do you
Well,
do?
you
That's it.
DIY, you figure it out.
Get on
And that's
YouTube University and
Yep,
do
and
your best.
that's why
Yeah.
YouTube University is such a growing place, because, and I'm talking more than plumbing, like, if you can't get good help, what do you do? And
I
that's a lot of what's happened
yeah.
is just,
I
people
think
aren't
that's pretty
plumbers, but I'm like,
encouraging.
"Well, I gotta fix this."
I think it's
But
pretty encouraging for all skilled tradespeople, new contractors. Good help
yeah,
is hard to find
yeah,
everywhere. There's so much work out there. I guess our nation spent how many decades promoting, getting out of the skilled trades,
yeah,
and
yeah,
now there's this huge void
exactly.
between the guys that are retiring and the guys that are coming in. You've got like the retirement age, and then the guys that are just entering the workforce, and those are the two main categories of tradespeople.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for all the skilled trades. I'm excited
yeah,
for our industry. You wrote
yeah,
a couple
and,
of books too, right?
maybe just let me speak to that one
Oh,
other,
sure.
comment on that, is that, even though there is the YouTube University and DIY help, those of us who are the professionals know the difference, especially plumbers, like, we're there going, "'Kay, I'm here because you messed this up," right?
Yeah. Did
And
you
you
do
can
this
make a big
yourself?
mess when you mess up plumbing, like, if it leaks or your drains are having issues, like, you can really have problems, so to
Yeah.
any of those tradesmen out there, like, yeah, people are figuring out how to do things for themselves, but they are desperate for a pro, They want people the whole market wants people who know this, who've done this so many times that they're fast, that they're proficient, that they're gonna have a good product when it's complete, and that's where, like, throughout, like, anywhere you're in the hands-on trades is a really good place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Those DIYers, it's a mixed bag, right? There's
Yeah,
just certain trades where you just really don't want to mess it up, right? Plumbing's certainly one of them.
yeah,
Especially if we're talking about drain lines. Well, I guess supply lines too. Really, plumbing is very expensive if you mess that up.
yep, it's a mess.
So,
So, yeah, you were
uh,
asking about books?
I was before I interrupted you. Sorry about
No, that's
that.
alright. So, in the course of my teaching, I could see that we needed a tool to help, plumbers get ready for their journeyman test, a study guide or something, and so it's actually like, I teamed up with the people who are involved with the one exam prep. There was another branch called Upstrive, but, at first I connected with them just to be a mentor, just to try and help people through that final stage of their either plumbing or contractor process. But as we were talking, they pointed out to me, there's a real need for a study guide for some way to help people. And I was like, you know what? I've been teaching plumbing for a long time. I know the code pretty well. I bet I could write some questions. And that's really like what we needed was a book full of test questions. So I started with the International Plumbing Code. I wrote this book. It's the 2022 Journeyman Plumber Contractor Exam Prep, available on Amazon and other. I think one exam prep may have it on their site, but this one is specific to the International Plumbing Code. Now, there's two plumbing codes, so there's the International and the Uniform Plumbing Code, and it depends on what state you're in on which one they use. But this one was because we use the International Plumbing Code. I was like, well, I'll write this one, and I wrote this up. And then after that, it was doing pretty well. So I was like, I'm gonna go dig in, read the Uniform Plumbing Code, and I wrote this book, which is the 23, is a year later, the Ultimate Journeyman Plumber. This is for the Uniform Plumbing Code book. It's helping plumbers and contractors who are trying to pass their test on their plumbing test. Um, this year, I'm just finished editing the second edition of these, which is for the 2024 versions of both codes. So both of those books are now going through the final editing process. They'll be available too later this year. But they're great resources for anyone who's trying to pass a plumber test. There's hundreds and hundreds of test questions. There's good advice on how to take a test, strategies on going about that. There's also like a study plan that if you just schedule it out and follow that plan, you can get through and really prepare for a test. So I really tried to create a resource for people who yeah, just need that final help to cross the finish line.
Well, that's super cool, man. I mean, there's such a need for it. I know for myself, I've been in, d- I've touched just about every trade in my my career. My whole adult life's been in construction,
Oh, good.
and for 20 years, I was scared to take the test to become a
Yep.
contractor. I mean, I'm a licensed contractor myself, I have a couple of different licenses, and just forever I was scared to take the test. It took me 20 years to finally get around to taking the test because I just didn't want to go through the studying. I thought I thought it was going to take me a year or two of studying with working full time and everything, and I thought it was going to, I would fail a few times, and it would just be this nightmare that drags out, just never ending process to try to get a license. And I actually have experience with one exam prep, and they really they've done a good job. They figured it out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that scary because I had somebody like yourself to hold my hand through the scary parts and show me the tips and tricks and the best ways to pass the exam. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so then a short time later, I was a licensed contractor, and so yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool that you've authored those books. Really, really cool. So,
Yeah, when
um,
I'll say you're not alone in feeling that way. Many people are intimidated by these tests, and the reality is that the states create these tests kind of to weed out those who don't know enough. I mean, when you come to plumbing, when you come to electrical, these are trades that and even building, structural, like these are things that affect people's health and safety. And if they're not done right, then it's not a good situation.
someone could
And
really
so,
get
of
hurt.
course, the state puts a high bar and they say, you got to be able to at least know this to get through, but it's not easy, and you can't coast through that. So there is that intimidation factor. A lot of people feel that where it's like, oh, this is a hard test. But the reality is that anyone like yourself who decides, I'm going to do this, I want this bad enough, can pass it. And that's where these resources that we're creating are intended to help that. Another resource that I've created is my YouTube channel. I have Plumber Tom. You can just find that on YouTube pretty easy.
Cool.
But I not only do I have some DIY videos for the people out there who are trying to figure this out for themselves, but I'm have an increasing number of code videos where I just explain it, and I've had a lot of people comment. Like I'll take them through the code. I'll explain section by section what it means. They'll binge watch. Like I had someone who commented, I just watched 13 hours of your code videos and then went and passed my test. And I'm sitting there like, I am sorry for you that you sat through that much code video,
Just went into
but
the test, bloodshot eyes.
oh
Just
yeah,
I'm ready. I'm
but
ready.
I'm totally glad. And that this person, and I get those comments almost weekly now where people watch my videos on YouTube and they're like, you helped me. And that's throughout the whole country. I get them from Florida to Texas. I've had some, yeah, from all over. They say, "Hey, I passed my test," and so yeah, it's like we have that challenge of overcoming the significant test. But again, I'm trying to create resources and helps for people to cross that finish line.
That's awesome, man. So, okay, well, since so our mission here is helping. Really, the focus is helping people that have already gotten their license, right? So, uh, in in that regard, let's dig a little deeper. What is the recommendation that you would have for a brand new plumbing contractor, and I'm sure most of this advice is going to be pretty universal and it'll carry over to multiple trades. What is the advice that you would give a brand new contractor, right? If you had to start over tomorrow, what's the first step you would take once you got your 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 licensure through the state, right? Like you're
Yeah.
official. You've got everything you need. You're officially in business. Now what?
Yeah, no, that's great. I have a couple thoughts on this, and I might qualify my comments by just saying that in addition to the plumbing that I've taught, I've done continuing education for contractors for years as well. And I've offered classes that are business help, like plumbing contractor business helps. For and this is beyond plumbing. This is any contractors, general contractors, any kind of contractor that's out there building. We're all in the same boat. We're all um, skilled with our hands, but also having to learn and be proficient in running a business, which is a totally different animal.
That's for
And I
sure.
tell I tell my apprentices, I'm like, "Hey, you're good at plumbing, and here's what automatically happens when you have a skill. People around you see that and they say, "Hey, you're good at that. You should go into business. You should do this for yourself." And you get those ideas and it's like, "Yeah, well, what if I could because I am good at this and look how much the money the boss makes. Maybe I could do that." And that's good. You need that dream. But all too often, I'm telling my apprentices, I'm like, you may be a journeyman or a master plumber, but you're a first year apprentice when it comes to running a business. And it's a totally different trade. It's a whole different skill set.
Interesting. That's a good way to
And
phrase it.
yeah, and if you don't know anything about running a business, you may be an excellent plumber, but you're gonna go become you mentioned earlier the statistic. I think we're referring to statistically, a lot of people go into business and fail, which is tragic. It's a horrible experience.
Hmm.
And that's the risk you take. You go out there and you're like, I'm going to start this business because I'm good at this, but I'm a first year apprentice on running a business. So, my advice in that is, I mean, don't shy away from that. If this is your dream, by all means, there's room for you and go for it. But you have to have help and you have to have an education. And that education does not have to look like a university degree in business. I'll say that I have that. During my apprenticeship years, I was also going to a university online at night. I worked through and got a bachelor's degree in business management. But frankly, that degree, like, it's a little bit applicable, but here's how I compare it. If you're in driver's ed, learning how to drive a car, and all you do is sit in the classroom and talk about it, you don't know how to drive a car. And that's kind of
Right.
what my degree was because I learned a lot about a business, but I never ran one. And then when I started mine in 2010, it was like, okay, these are the brakes, this is the gas, this is how I steer this thing, and it became real, right? Now I'm running a business. So in the same way, like if you're learning how to run a business, you don't have to have a degree. That may help, but if you don't, there are lots of helps that don't require a degree. The government has online helps. There's courses you can take. This Next Level Contractor is loaded with resources to get you what you need to know because you're going to need that education. You're going to need help to get from apprentice one business owner to master business owner. And the master business owner is the guy who's really killing it, right? Who's doing great. But there's some lessons to learn on the way, and you should be open to that sort of help.
This episode of the Next Level Contractor is sponsored by One Contractor Solutions, Florida's leading provider of back office services for builders, contractors, subcontractors, and developers. From permit expediting and private provider services to contractor municipality registrations, insurance supplement assistance, and bookkeeping, they are your one-stop shop for managing your contractor back office. Save time and money with One Contractor Solutions. Get a free, no obligation quote today at www.onecontractorsolutions.com or call 954 233 0155. That is huge advice. I'm sure that, that first day apprentice, he sees the big boss making all that money. with no real idea what he's put into it, right? He thinks
Yep.
once the apprentice is out in the field, the big boss is just sitting in his recliner watching TV all day. Doesn't really understand everything that goes into running the business side of it.
Right.
And it's I'm sure it's a rude awakening for most brand new contractors owning the business themselves. That is very, very good advice. Seek help and education.
Yeah.
And so, can people reach you through your YouTube channel? You probably have your
Yeah.
contact information there.
Yeah, that's an easy way to reach out to me. Just go through the YouTube channel.
Cool.
Um,
So,
I as
go
we
ahead.
as we discuss getting those business helps,
Mhm.
I took a class just as I was starting my business because I knew like I had a degree, but I still didn't know what I was doing. And I took a free class in the community, and the guy was a longtime banker he was volunteer. He was teaching this class. He had some really good advice. And he said that when you start a business, you need to have some professional friends, some people, because we're talking about like you need to have that education. You need to know more than you know. And he gave at least three people that he recommends that every contractor, every business owner should have. One is an accountant. Now, an accountant is someone who's going to help you with your books and keep you out of trouble. And if you don't have help with the money management side and you're not very self-disciplined, you'll run yourself into a hole pretty quick. So he said, get an accountant. They can help you with all that side of it. He said, make friends with an attorney or a lawyer. You don't have to like use them all the time, but especially when you're setting the thing up, make sure that you're, protected. That's the role there is to make sure that your bases are covered and that you've got things in place that you can, yeah, be protected if there's an issue. And the third one he said was a banker, someone that knows a lot about money and about how you can keep your money. But I
Mhm.
felt like that was sound advice, like you're gonna have to
I'd
reach
say so.
beyond your circles, find some professionals, at a minimum, get an accountant, someone to show you, because most of us
At
tradesmen are
minimum.
not good bookkeepers.
Right, well, sure. I mean, the tax code is only, like 3 miles long, you know? It's,
Right.
huge. It's crazy how big the tax code is. So, yeah, that is some that is some good advice from that banker fella.
Yeah.
That's cool. So what's a mistake or a couple of mistakes that you made out of the gate, that, if you had it to do over again, you would like to avoid?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I think part of it is coming to an understanding of what you've done when you create a business. Because we get, stars in our eyes of like all the potential. But the way I teach it and the way I compare it is when you create a business, you create what's called an entity. And this entity, if you have it set up right, you have it registered with the state and you got your licensing and your insurance in place. Once you create this entity, what you've created is almost like a living thing. It's like this creature, and you have to feed it. As soon as you open your doors, as soon as you're a business, there's automatically expenses, reoccurring expenses
Mhm.
you're going to have to pay. And this creature eats money, and you always have to feed it money. And this creature, this entity you've created, there's a unique relationship because if you feed it well, then it will turn around and feed you. If you manage it well, if you take good care of it. If you neglect it, and this is the biggest mistake that contractors make, anyone with the hands on, they get out there and they start running and running and running, and they're trying to just keep the work going to get new customers. And not only that, but like as a contractor, so often we're like, I love putting things together with my hands. I hate sitting at a computer and looking at a spreadsheet. And so we get this avoidant behavior where it's like, I don't want to take care of that. I don't want to do that next week. I'll do that next month. And so that's a major pitfall for a lot of contractors is like procrastination or avoiding. But going back to this creature, now it's a monster because if I don't feed it, it doesn't sleep and it doesn't die. It turns right around and starts eating me. It eats my resources, it eats my assets, it starts reaching into my personal life taking out my personal savings because it will not go away. And if I neglect it, it's going to eat me alive. So, I mean, to answer your question, like, what are the mistakes I made? I made some of those mistakes where I was like, just trying to roll along, but not realizing that I don't know, I was overextending.
So you weren't
And
reinvesting back into the company, you were just using the immediate profits for your personal expenses, like that was your paycheck, and you weren't
yeah, and what
putting the money back into the business, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, and I did a little of both. So, like, when you're starting your business and you're desperate, I was knocking doors, begging for work. You're in survival mode, and you're just hoping that you can get enough to live. Pretty quickly into my business, after I'd opened my doors, I bought a service business from a retiring plumber.
Mhm.
Which at first I didn't see really the value. Why should I buy someone's business? I'll just go out and advertise and get his business because he was retiring. But it was the best choice I'd ever made because as soon as I took on his phone number, my phone would not stop ringing and I had all this work really
Ah,
fast. So it was jump start of my business. That was great. But then my pitfall was where I think a lot of contractors want to go, and that was growth. Growth is something that there's this fallacy where you think if I grow, I make more money. And if I grow more, I make more money. And so then you push in the direction of growth. But what you fail to see at first is how much money growth costs. And so I
mm,
would take the money that I was making and reinvest that in the business. I hired people, I bought more vans. But there's this real delicate balance between having the ability to do the work with people and resources and the amount of work. And I was always struggling with that, like, okay, well, now I've hired a guy, but I don't have quite enough work, or vice versa. I've got all this work, but I need to hire a guy. And it was just always kind of this back and forth is really challenging. I think a lot of us face that challenge. But in that process, sometimes I would overextend in my attempts to grow. And that's where my entity would start to eat me because it was like, well, hey, now you have all these vehicles, whether you have the work or not, you're paying these bills. And it starts to like overreach. Another piece of advice on that is like when we talk about bookkeeping, having an accountant on your side,
right,
you absolutely have to keep your personal finances separate from your business. And that's what, like, when you form an LLC, a limited liability corporation, that's one of the best ways to set up a business because a limited liability says all the business assets are separate. And if someone wants to sue me and take everything I had, they can have that, but they don't get my house. They don't get any of my personal stuff. And they call that the corporate veil, where it's like, if as long as that's in place and there's a clear separation, none of my personal expenses ever pay for my business. None of my business ever pays for my personal. We keep this separate, then I'm protected on my assets,
right,
like
they call I think they
my
call that
retirement money.
piercing the corporate veil, right?
Yes. And
Don't pierce the corporate
so
veil.
many inexperienced contractors make that mistake where they're like, "Well, this is all my money. I'm just gonna put some here and put some there."
Right,
Now, that's
what
not
does
to
it
say, like,
matter? Yeah,
I've done this even recently where it's like I needed to float my business, so I can hand money over from my personal, and it's all about accounting, but you label that as this was a donation, a capital investment. I put some money from the owner into the business.
right,
That's okay. But it's
right.
this overreach of like, "No, I'm gonna pay my mortgage with my
With my
business."
business credit card or something, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm gonna buy something for the house with my
yeah,
business credit card because there's money in that account or something like that, and then you've pierced the corporate veil, and if you get sued and
exactly.
and they look at your bank logs,
Yep,
that
you're
is a
wide open.
way that then you've just connected financially the entity that's being sued to your personal finances.
And
So
yep,
now there's no longer that protection.
and they can take it all. And now and we could sit and talk about, all that side on the accounting and how to keep it straight, but that's not really the conversation for us. That's like, go talk to your accountant. That's why I say get an accountant, because
Yeah,
he's the guy that's gonna be like, "Okay, here's how you protect yourself over here. Here's how we're gonna keep it straight and make sure that your everything's accounted for, your incomes, your expenses." And that's the best way to keep yourself afloat as you're working through that growth process.
is keeping things separate so you can truly analyze the health of your
Yeah,
business, and it's not all muddled with your
Yeah.
personal finances, and you have no idea where anything stands.
Yeah, and that brings me to another thing that I've seen other contractors do that I feel is a disadvantage, and that is the cash under the table thing. Um, I've known plumbers that are like, "Hey, just pay me cash," and then he puts it in his pocket, but he doesn't have to account for that on his business,
Hmm.
and he goes and just uses that, right? Well, that
I
never
I thought
shows
we weren't
up.
supposed to talk about that.
What's that?
I said I thought we weren't supposed to talk about that.
I know. I'm the guy though I'm gonna
Tom,
bring up
what are you doing?
uncomfortable topics. Well, and same with employees. Here's the disadvantage you do to yourself, and that is when you have stuff that's cash and it's not showing up on your books, it doesn't reflect on your business itself. So if you're just a survival mode guy and you don't care what happens to you in the end, well, fine, do that. But here's where I'm going with this.
Right, you've got nothing to
Ultimately,
lose.
when you create that entity and you say, here's I'm created this thing and it's alive and I'm going to feed it. A lot of us, especially as we start, are not thinking like, when am I going to retire and what's that going to look like? And my advice is that when you start a business, you should have your end game in mind, meaning like this may be, 3 decades down the road. But in the end, what is it going to look like? There's only two ends to these businesses. One is you just shut down, close your doors, and walk away. It's over. But that doesn't give you anything. Like that's the stupidest way to end a business because a business has value. Going back to this guy that sold me his business, I paid him for years, lots of money because he was able to sell an asset. That asset was his business. It did huge things for me. It did huge things for him. But if you don't look ahead and you're just like paying under the table, your business does not show value or not as much value. And then it's not as valuable in the end. So the other option, if you don't just let it die, is you sell it or you move that into a place. And this is the ideal. If you don't sell it to someone else, you sell it to your own people. Like you raise people within the business to take it over. And then you sit back for the next decades of your retirement and they're paying you and they're paying you. And that's like, especially when you're first starting a business, you don't really see that far ahead. You're like, I'm just trying to survive this thing. But if you have that in mind, it's like, I want this to be as beautiful, polished, efficient, and valuable as possible. Then in the end, if I sell it, it's worth a lot and I just take the money. Or if I sell it to one of my employees, I'm still there to guide and to help them, but I'm not doing all the work anymore and I get a check all the time. That's a much better end than just I close my doors. So going
Right,
back to the
so
cash thing,
exit strategy, right? You gotta have at
yeah,
least
it's the
one
exit
exit
strategy.
strategy in mind.
Exactly. And going back to the cash thing, if you account for all that, it shows up in there. It shows, well, I did make profits. I did make that money on all that work I did. And while, and the cash thing's the street people, just like let the money go flow through and go spend it on whatever I want. I'm not going to pay Uncle Sam. Yeah, you may be liable to some taxes, but in the end, that sort of a lifestyle is not as good of an exit strategy. I'll just say
Right,
that.
there's no value to show, right? Well, yeah, it
Yeah.
says here you made no money. Oh, but I
Yep.
did, I promise. It was all just,
Yep.
cash. I got it.
And then
I
the
got it.
government's like, well, did you? I guess you owe me something.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
rock and a hard place right there. You try to prove your business has value, without showing any value whatsoever.
right. Yeah. So I mean, that's one of the mistakes I would recommend avoiding.
And you can only get so big that way as well. I mean, if your
Hmm.
goal is to stay as small as possible and be a 1 or 2 man show, until you're, ready to call it quits, I guess that's a way to go about it, right? That under
Yeah.
the table way. I'm not promoting that at all. But
Right.
people do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to scale the business in any way at all and have growth of any kind, yeah, you'll have to prove income.
Yep.
You just
Exactly.
and the more money that comes in, the larger you grow your business, the more risky it becomes to try to hide that from
Yeah.
you know, the powers that the men that show up with guns that want their cut, right?
Right.
So, yeah, that's good. I mean, without even thinking about like, the legal, the danger, in in hiding income. Um, yeah, just the exit strategy alone makes
Yeah.
it not worth hiding all your income.
Yeah. So be forthright. And that's once again where my accountant, man, I love him because when I hand my books over to him, and when I've been careful and accounted, like, I code my expenses. And if you don't want to do all this, get a bookkeeper
I was
that
just
helps
about
you.
to ask that question. Do you do it yourself or do you have a bookkeeper?
Yeah, mine's small enough that I do. But when I started my business, what happened right away was like I just took on with this old guy was doing, and he was doing everything by hand, like every invoice. He had a handwritten ledger. I was like,
Oh,
no, I'm gonna use technology to my
nice.
advantage, but I had to figure that out. So I got QuickBooks and I started doing my own books, and that was good for me in that at least I knew all the moving pieces. But it was terrible for me because I would go out and do work. From 8 in the morning to 6 at night, I'm just plumbing as hard as I can, and then I have to go deal with all my invoicing, and I'm up till midnight trying to run my business, and I came pretty quick to where, like, I went and hired a bookkeeper who just did all that for me, and at the time, it was, like, $500 a month, but to me, that was so worth it to just be like, "'Kay, now
Well,
I go do what
sure.
I'm good at. You keep me straight and keep my money moving, and we got a great thing going," you know? So there's different ways to
Absolutely.
handle it,
I
but
mean, yeah, when your business is charging 1, $200 an hour, and you're only spending $500 a month for someone to spend however many hours you were spending,
oh, yeah.
on your books, oh, yeah, it's a no-brainer. So, yeah,
Yeah,
you start thinking in terms of what's my time worth.
yeah. And at this time, like, I do my own books because, like I say, I'm a full-time educator. I invoice a couple times a week. It's not heavy, but
Right,
if
so
you're
the
trying to
yeah,
grow
the
if you're trying to
occasional
grow your
data
business.
entry a couple times a
Yeah,
month, no big deal. But, yeah, if you're
yeah.
trying to grow, absolutely, that yeah, I was wondering about that. I didn't know if you'd had a bookkeeper or if you did it all yourself all the time. What software do you use? I'm sure people wanna know.
Yeah, so I had used QuickBooks. At the time, they didn't have as good of a cloud-based, format, so I went years ago to one that's called Xero. It's spelled with a X,
Oh,
E-R-O.
okay.
But there's probably a dozen or so online cloud-based, and I say cloud-based because especially as a service plumber, I wanted to be able to access. I still do, like,
From out in the
yesterday
field.
yesterday I was on site with a general contractor. We're looking over this, underground plumbing I'm gonna do today, and he's like, "Hey, you know that roof you finished last week? Could you send me an invoice on that? Because 'Cause I'd like to pay you on this next draw." And I'm like, "Heck yeah, like, if my contractor is asking to give me money, I'm not gonna get in his way." But I'm
Yeah.
not home, so I get
No,
into my
no, I'm not
phone.
ready for the money. Yeah, no, that doesn't
Right.
happen.
If someone's putting money towards you, never
Just hold
never
on to
get in their
that.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just got on my phone, got into my system, completed the invoice, emailed it to him from right there, and like, that's why I say if you want a system, you want something cloud-based that you can access easily anywhere and that you can modify. So I use Zero, but, like, there's quite a few out there that you can use, and, as long as they're, credible and but the thing I like about Zero is that so part of that bookkeeping is reconciling all your expenses, and that's another pitfall for contractors. Is like I paid for my gasoline in my vehicle, I paid for my supplies, I paid for some new tools, and those receipts you might not even save them. Whatever happens, like every time money moves in a business, it has to be coded. It has to. You have to say this is what it was for. It was for
Mhm.
gas. It was for tools. It was for. And when all that's accounted for, then when you hand in your taxes, it's like, okay, well, all these expenses can be written off, and that affects the bottom line, right? But going back to that system, Zero helps me because well, back when I was doing a lot more of it through QuickBooks, and it was more, I don't know, hands-on with the reconciling. I'd have to go do all of that.
Mhm.
Now it's like it connects with my bank account, it brings in all those expenses, it pops them in my face, and in about 10 minutes, maybe 10 minutes a week, I can just go click through and be like, "Okay, this was this, and this was that,
Oh,
and
it's
this was
all linked
that."
to your bank account. Is Zero
Yeah.
paying you to say all this?
No, no one's paying me to say any of this. I'm just saying, like, I spent so ridiculous much time trying to keep my books straight, And when I found a platform, Zero is a good one. There's other ones that will do this. You connect them to your bank accounts. They automatically bring in your expenses. And again, this is why I don't use cash. I use things that I can easily track electronically. And then I
Right.
say, okay, this was for this reason and this was for that reason. And it all goes in. And then the end, I just barely turn in my taxes to my accountant. He just looks at it and like everything's where it needs to be. But maybe
Nice.
that's another comment on what it takes to succeed as a contractor. You really have to have discipline, enough discipline, self-discipline to force yourself to that computer
To at least be a
when
little bit organized.
yeah, when it
Organized enough
when
to
it's
do your
more
taxes.
fun and you'd much rather just go out and put together some more pipe. But
Yeah.
you have to force yourself and be disciplined enough if you want to be a success. I know of so many that struggle. I'll tell this story. I was in the plumbing supplier talking to one of my previous students. He graduated, he got his journeyman, he got a master, he's a contractor now. And we're both like, yeah, hey, how's business? And I think I asked him about like how does he bid for jobs? And he said, oh, I don't bid. I just, take whatever there's plenty of work. So the contractors just give it to me. And I was like, what? Okay, like, you don't even know
Yeah.
how much money
Whoa.
you're gonna make in the end? Like, like, if you wanna be a success in this, and I'd imagine anyone watching this, anyone that's coming to Next Level Contractor for help are the kind of people who care enough about their own future and success to try and make better. Like, if you're that kind of person, then you have to be in the details of your books. You have to know, like, for every single job, if I bid this, how much money am I expected to make? And if you never look back at a job and track like what were my expenses and how much did I make on that job, how in the world are you going to know if you made enough
If
money,
you
if you're
even
going to
made a
meet your
profit.
expenses, or if not only that, like if you make the kind of money you want, if you're going to be able to
Yeah.
continue in the future. So again, self-discipline and tracking systems are essential.
And I imagine having some software that helps you, track those expenses probably means that you don't have to pay your bookkeeper quite as much, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I
So
don't even again now I don't even have a bookkeeper. There was a period too when my accountant helped with parts of my bookkeeping. So it really depends on how much you're dealing with and
mm,
how much you want to rely on someone else, how much you want to learn and do for yourself. But regardless, you can't neglect that. That goes back to you've created an entity. If you don't feed this monster, it will eat you. If you treat it nice, it can treat you really well, but you have to learn how to take care of it.
yeah, I've not heard it said that way where you have to feed this business or it turns into a monster. I've heard it, where you have to like the profits from your business are your business's children, and then you have to use your business's children to make more children. I've heard it say so many
That's a good
ways,
one.
but I've never heard it say it's going to turn into a monster if you don't feed it. That is
Yeah.
probably the truest analogy I've ever heard for something like that, because it
Yeah,
will eat you alive
it
if
will.
you neglect the finances.
And I'll say too, I think some of the saddest things that I've witnessed are the way that when someone's being eaten alive by their business,
Mm.
it destroys more than their finances. It destroys their relationships. Marriages fall apart when,
Yeah.
like, and maybe it's even embarrassing. Like, I don't want my wife to know I just messed this up this bad. It puts huge strains on
Yeah.
this. And
I mean, I think that's another statistic, the percentage of fights in marriages, like, the majority of them are about finances.
yeah,
Divorce rates, majority has to do with finances. I mean, yeah, it's a big, big deal. Finances are a huge part of life.
they are. Yeah. And so that when we talk about that entity, again, if I treat it well, it's going to take really good care of me for life. But if I neglect it, if I don't know how to take care of it, it can destroy more than just money. It can destroy, and like think about mentally, emotionally. Even if I don't lose my marriage, what's going on inside of me? And I've been there in times when I had overextended and my debts were too high and it was starting to just really eat at me. And I had hard decisions to make. And that mental and emotional strain, even if that's the only thing I'm dealing with, is huge. And so again, like having that self-discipline, having a professional accountant, maybe that's the theme of our talk here.
Yeah,
Those are the
maybe so.
things that are gonna keep you in business and keep you happy.
Um, Tom, let me ask you something. I mean, this is all great information. I feel like there's expounding that needs to happen, but I know that we're out of time. Would you be willing to come back for a part two?
Oh, sure,
Can
yeah,
this
I'd be
be
glad
part
to.
1? We come back for a part 2, and we could get into, how to avoid those pitfalls. I mean, we got into it a little bit, having some financial discipline, having somebody help you with your finances, but there's still so much to touch on when it comes
Oh, yeah.
to being a contract, like the advertising, the marketing,
Yep. Oh, I have
the
opinions on
how
that.
to. Good, good. I'd love to hear them. So
Yeah,
for today, I'm just gonna say thank you so much for your time. And if anyone that's listening to this or watching this, if you got something out of it, please like it, subscribe, share it. It just helps us, lets us know we're on the right track, and it also allows us to continue creating this content for you. And we're gonna have Tom back for a part 2 soon. So I guess you and I can just coordinate that, Tom.
sure.
A little after this, but we really appreciate you, Tom. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
all the time and all the information. And hey, man, you got my contact information, so reach out if you need anything. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I do appreciate that.
All right. Thanks. Take it easy.